Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahushai, Bahasham, Rakha Kodash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of Isaiah, the 49th chapter, which deals with a couple of things. But as you can see in the subheading here, salvation reaches to the end of the earth. And this is all mainly pertinent to the nation of Israel, as some who lack understanding of some of these verses would think that it applies to these heathens because of the word Gentiles, as we'll see. But in actuality, this is in reference to Israel, and that's why the context is important. So we'll get into it as we get into these verses here. But anyway, if we take a look here at Isaiah 48, refreshing my memory on here and recapping, I believe we ended off here with the deliverance of Israel that was promised by the Lord. And so going into Isaiah 49, I know that wasn't much of a recap, but you can go and watch the video and you'll see what it's about. So in Isaiah 49 verse 1, listen, O isles, unto me, and hearken, ye people, from far. The Lord Yahweh hath called me from the womb. Right. So this is Isaiah basically saying, like, making an announcement, right, to say that everybody should be attentive and hear what it is that he is about to say. And he starts off by mentioning, right, the Lord hath called me from the womb. From the bowels of my mother hath he made mention of my name. And it was similar to what's written in the book of Jeremiah, where the Lord said he knew Jeremiah, right, basically from birth, before being born, right? And because it's at the end of the day, we are spirits in bodies, right? And so our spirits exist prior to us being born in the physical body on the earth, because our spirits are in the spirit world. Okay, so the Lord knew Isaiah and his spirit and what he was ordained to do, right? By calling him, he ultimately commissioned him from birth to do this job. As it says, from the bowels of my mother hath he made mention of my name. And he hath made my mouth like a sharp sword. Why? Because Isaiah was going to teach. So that the mouth being like a sharp sword, it's not literal, obviously, but it is to be skillful, right, in teaching this word, which is needed for times when you have to explain certain things, you know, dark sayings, and also defend the gospel, right? And the Lord mentioned giving us a mouth that none of our adversaries would be able to gainsay nor resist. So it's not really your actual lips per se. Of course, you're gonna need to be able to, you know, get your point across, but it's the wisdom and the spirit that we would be granted in order to do this. And that's likened onto a sharp sword. In the shadow of his hand hath he hid me, right? So like the, like if you enclose your arm to your hand to make a fist, right? You create a little shadow in the midst of it. And this is just Isaiah speaking in a poetic sense here, right? But he refers to himself as being hid, right? Like in the palm or the shadow of the Lord's hand. And made me a polished shaft, which that word shaft goes into an arrow. Okay, and a polished arrow is a sharpened arrow. In the quiver, or in his quiver hath he hid me, right? So the Lord, Isaiah is likened himself onto a sharpened arrow hidden in the Lord's quiver, because that is like what the prophets are. Okay, we're also likened onto arrows that the Lord uses to send his message, right? Or to hit his target. And in this case, that would be by giving or making public the word or the message of the Lord. Verse 3, and he said unto me, thou art my servant, O Israel, thou art my servant, O Israel, in whom I will be glorified. Now, as we read in this in these verses, it's important to keep in mind that similar to other chapters like Daniel, the 11th chapter, where it's not always explicit. Sometimes it can even sound ambiguous who the pronoun is referring to, right? So it's not always explicit. Okay, I'm switching context here to talk about another person. Okay, but there are often times in some of these precepts where that does happen. So as Isaiah is saying, the Lord said unto him, Thou art my servant, O Israel, in whom I will be glorified. Because the glorification of the Lord, and you'll see in other precepts, when we were in danger and you had certain individuals pray unto the Lord, they called that to the Lord's remembrance to say, Lord, we are your only nation, right? We are the only ones that are going to glorify your name. And you've put your name within Israel, right? You've bound yourself to us. And so we are here to glorify you. All right. And the Lord is telling that to Isaiah, that it is through Israel that he is that he is glorified as his nation, his chosen people. Verse 4, Then I said, I have labored in vain. I have spent my strength for naught and in vain. So as Isaiah is saying here, and why is he saying this? Because having constantly, right, of all these chapters we've read, constantly prophesying and calling out to these people, laboring to get them to see the word of the Lord, to hear the word of the Lord, to take it seriously, that wasn't really happening, right? You had them mocking him, and he mentioned that in some of these chapters here, that they mocked, they refused to listen. Some of them even came against him, just like the other prophets. So Isaiah is saying his labor, it feels like his labor has been in vain, and he's used his strength for nothing, because it's not yielding the results that you would think it would yield. And that feeling is shared, right? When you, in this time, right, when you wake up to the truth, you have that strong zeal. You want to tell everybody about it, but it isn't until later that you realize and you fully understand that the reason not everybody jumps with excitement by hearing you teaching this word is because it's not everybody whose ears and eyes have been opened to receive it. So it's not for them. But prior to fully understanding that, it feels almost like your words are falling on deaf ears, that you're constantly going out there and yet nothing is happening. But there's actually a lot more happening than you can see. Yet surely my judgment is with the Lord Yahweh, and my work with my God. Right. And basically, even though, right, he may have felt this way, his reward, okay, or the outcome of the work he is doing is going to be with the Lord, right? It's going to be justified by the Lord, because a prophet's reward or a prophet's job is not I guess graded, for lack of a better word, by how many people listen or how many people take heed, but rather whether he goes out and gives the message or not. Because it's not up to the prophets to make you believe, and it's not up to the prophets, right, to convert you, right? We're not the ones making you change your lifestyle after hearing this. We're really here to give the message. That's the reason the Lord sent out his prophets. Okay. What comes after that is of the Lord. And the Apostle Paul mentions that in 1 Corinthians, the 3rd chapter. The Lord is the one who gives the increase. So our job is to give the word. And once we do that, our job is done. Now, reading this in the NLT, I replied, but my work seems so useless. I have spent my strength for nothing and to no purpose. Yet I leave it all in the Lord's hand. I will trust God for my reward. Verse 5. And now, saith the Lord Yahweh, that formed me from the womb to be his servant, to bring Jacob again to him. And how would that happen? By way of prophesying. Now, as we continue on in the latter verses, you'll see here that though the Lord may be speaking to Isaiah, right, in this physical sense, Isaiah is a representation here of the servants of the Lord, okay, or of the elect of the Lord, which starts with Yahushai, right? Because all the things that are mentioned that the servants would do and how they would do it is only made possible through Yahushai. But we know that it's not only exclusive to Isaiah, as we're about to read continuing on, because though he may have done these things, he wasn't the only one doing it, right? He was one of many servants, or one of many prophets, or one of many brethren that were doing this, or that were in this stead. So in verse 5, and now saith the Lord Yahweh that formed me from the womb to be his servant, which goes to show you that the servants of the Lord, you don't become a servant of the Lord randomly or of your own choice. You are created to be a servant of the Lord. Now, whether you realize that sooner or later in life, that's up to the Lord. But your vessel, like, for example, the Apostle Paul, this is the reason why the Apostle Paul, the Lord still had mercy on him and told Ananias he is a chosen vessel. Because even though for however many years of Paul's life, he wasn't preaching the ministry of Yahushua, or he spent a certain amount of time persecuting the believers in Yahushua, he was still created from the womb to be a servant of the Lord. But it was at an appointed time that the Lord would wake him up and activate him to begin his service. Continuing, to bring Jacob again to him. So when Jacob, which represents Israel, starts to go astray, the Lord sends the spirit of the prophets down onto the earth in a body through birth, and puts it into their spirit and speaks to them and gives them the message that they should go and then prophesy or teach. Because sometimes it's not just prophesying of foretelling them of things to happen, but it's also reproving them and correcting them and teaching them to say, hey, stop what you're doing. You're drifting further and further away from the Lord. Turn back. That's the job. That's why we preach repentance. Repentance is really turning back again to the Lord, right? So that's why he mentions to bring Jacob again to him by teaching them and relaying the message of the Lord to them, so that they can stop in the wrong way that they're going and turn around and return back to the Lord. Though Israel be not gathered, yet shall I be glorious in the eyes of the Lord, which goes back to the preceding verse that I mentioned, right? Even though by teaching this word, not all Israel is going to receive it, not all of them are going to be gathered, and though sometimes it may seem like it's in vain, in the eyes of the Lord, the prophets are still special, and their job is still special, because it's not the specialness, right, of their role is not dictated by how many people believe what they're saying, but by how diligent they are in still teaching that and being obedient to the Lord. So as he says, yet shall I be glorious in the eyes of the Lord, and my God shall be my strength, right? Which, like I mentioned, it's the same sentiment that is echoed and shared amongst us all, right? As believers in Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai, who depend upon him to be our strength. Verse 6, and he said, it is a light thing that thou shouldest be my servant, to raise up the tribes of Jacob, and to restore the preserved of Israel. I will also give thee for a light to the Gentiles, that thou mayest be my salvation unto the end of the earth. Okay, now here, as we're reading here, right, the Lord is speaking to Isaiah, but in the spirit, he's referring to Yahushua first and foremost. Okay, as I mentioned, Yahushua being the essence of this all, but also to the prophets. Okay, and then I'm going to explain why. So starting off, as he says, and he said, it is a light thing that thou shouldest be my servant, right? And the light thing meaning that it's this is what you were created to do, right? So it's not like a big deal, right? It's standard that you are my servant to raise up the tribes of Jacob by teaching them this word and this truth, right? And to restore the preserved of Israel. And who are the preserved of Israel? The elect, the ones, the remnant that would always believe in the words of the Lord. But why would they need to be restored? Because even in this time, the elect weren't always in the stead that they are in right now. So what I mean is, the elect are gonna have to still be taught again, so they may be woken up, but at that point they would believe, because ultimately they would be preserved, but they needed to still be restored by being having their minds, right, being stirred up again. And then it mentions here, I will give thee for a light to the Gentiles, that thou mayest be my salvation unto the end of the earth. Now, when we go back to Isaiah the 42nd chapter, remember that this is this was talking about Yahushai, right? This is what the Lord said about Yahushai, going back to Isaiah 42, right? And yeah, really went on down to about, what is that? Yeah, about 7 on or so. But really here, Isaiah 42:6, it says, I, the Lord, have called thee in righteousness, and will hold thine hand, and will keep thee, and give thee for a covenant of the people, for a light of the Gentiles, right? And so that's the same thing that's being said over here. So who is the ultimate light that was given to the Gentiles? Yahushai. And the Gentiles here are referring to Israelites. Okay, they're called Israelites here because the Lord, if you notice, this is future tense. I will also give thee for a light to the Gentiles. And so the Lord is referring to a time where you would have Israelites that would be living in a heathenistic state of mind, right? Through different events that would occur, primarily one being captivity. Because when you fast forward from the time of Isaiah, leading into the years down the line, when you had the Hellenization period and so on and so forth, that's when you had a great deal of Israelites becoming Gentiles, meaning they started to leave their heritage and their customs and started to take on that of the heathens, to the extent that they forgot who they were and started to live like heathens. And it's the same thing that ended up happening now, right after we fell away from our heritage. Okay, so those Gentiles are the same quote unquote Gentiles that are mentioned in the New Testament as being eligible to receive salvation. They're not the Lord isn't referring to heathen nations here, right? He's referring to actual Israelites that were in that state of mind. Okay, and so the light that was given to them was who? Yahushai. And that's why, first and foremost, this applies to Yahushai, because he is the light that's given to the Gentiles or the Israelites, that through him they could find their way back, okay, back to the Father, back to the fold, and ultimately to salvation. However, the way the prophets fit in here, or the servants, is because how is Yahushai given, or how is that light given to the Gentiles? By the way of teaching, by the way of preaching. And who is doing that teaching and who is doing that preaching? The servants of the Lord, which are the prophets, Isaiah included. So here, when the Lord is speaking to Isaiah, he's really not speaking to the exact incarnation as Isaiah, but more so to the spirit of Isaiah, because during Isaiah's time, the majority of Israel weren't known as Gentiles. They weren't living in a Gentile state of mind to the extent that they forgot who they were. They still knew that they were Israelites. Even majority of the ones that were in foreign lands who would come back, they still had that knowledge. It wasn't until much after that where you ended up having a great falling away, like I mentioned, through different events that took place, to where the majority or a good portion of Israelites started to become known as Gentiles. And the Apostle Paul mentions that, right? Ye being in past time Gentiles. How did that happen? Through them leaving the customs. Okay? So the Lord is going to give that light. And when you actually go into the word light, it also goes into what? Instruction. Because they needed to be instructed on the right way, right? Light of instruction. So they needed to be instructed on the right way to live, which was different than what they were currently doing. And this was applicable starting back then when Yahushua came on the scene, and more so now, right? So as I mentioned, Isaiah is one of those, right, who would be part of giving that light, because he would be one of those teachers. Obviously, we know Isaiah came back in the reincarnation at different points in time. And being that he had the spirit of a prophet, what would he do? He would prophesy. So Isaiah would be there at the time during the Yahushua. He would be here in this time doing the same thing, right? Giving that light to the Gentiles, which is done by what? By teaching and preaching the gospel of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai, that those that believe on Yahushai would be able to gain that salvation. And that's what leads into the latter part of this, which says that thou mayest be my salvation unto the end of the earth. So once again, firstly, starting with the Yahushai, how is he the salvation? Well, it's in his name, right? But it is through Yahushai, because of what he did, that we can gain salvation. So when you look at how when the gospel was being preached and is being preached now, the centerpiece is Yahushai, because you can't gain salvation any other way than through Yahushai, by first and foremost believing on him, who he is, and what he was created to do, and accepting that. Okay, so he is the salvation. But once again, how is that salvation then being exposed to the nation of Israel, to those that are preserved, to the quote unquote Gentiles, by being taught, okay, by the prophets? So matter of fact, let me look into here, as it says, onto the end of the earth, right, which leads into our time today as well, because the end you have in one sense of geographical location, but you also have end in the sense of a time. Right, so it says here, end extremity, at the end of a certain time. Right, and so in the ultimate or the strongest sense of it, that time of the end of the earth would be now, right, in the latter days. Because this is the time that salvation is actually going to be granted, right? This is the time when salvation is going to be experienced, I should say, amongst the elect. So yeah, what I wanted to get was, I believe it's Romans 13. And let's see, is it? No, I think it's Romans 10 and 13. There we go. So this is Romans chapter 10, verse 13. For whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. But that's not the end of it, right? How then shall they call on him in whom they have not believed? And how shall they believe in him of whom they have not heard? And how shall they hear without a preacher? And how shall they preach except they be sent? As it is written, how beautiful are the feet of them that preach the gospel of peace and bring glad tidings of good things. See, so you need the light, but you also need those that bear the light, right? Those that bear witness of the light, those that preach. Because as we read here as an example, calling on the name of the Lord is ultimately what gets you saved. But how are you going to call on somebody you don't know? And how are you going to know somebody, or call on somebody you haven't believed in? And how are you going to believe on somebody you don't know? You need somebody to come and teach you, somebody to bring that light to you. So now going back to the book of Isaiah chapter 49, continuing in verse 7, thus saith the Lord, the Redeemer of Israel and his Holy One, right? So because the Lord is the Redeemer of Israel and the Holy One of Israel, right? So he is the Holy One of Israel. To him whom man despiseth, to him whom the nation abhorreth. Now the him here is referring to the nation, right? To Israel collectively. Sometimes it uses the pronoun of them, but sometimes it says him. Just like sometimes it'll say Jacob, but that's referring to Israel or the nation. So as it says, to him whom man despiseth, to him whom the nation abhorreth, to a servant of rulers, right? And this is the condition or the position that Israel has been in, right? And that due to what? The curses, being despised, right? Being abhorred, being a servant of rulers, of subject to other kings. As it says, kings shall see and arise, princes also shall worship. So the Lord is going to take us from that low state and raise us up to a point where, as it says, kings shall see and arise, right? They're going to see you and stand up in reverence. Princes shall worship because of the Lord Yahweh that is faithful. So this is only going to happen because the Lord is faithful, because he had promised that he would deliver us and he would grant us this blessing. So by him being faithful to that, this can actually be fulfilled. And the Holy One of Israel, and he shall choose thee. So who did the Lord choose? He chose Israel. I want to see how this is worded. Okay, NLT is not bad. Right, so it says here, the Lord, the Redeemer and Holy One of Israel says to the one who is despised and rejected by the nations, to the one who is the servant of rulers, kings shall stand at attention when you pass by. Princes will also bow low because of the Lord, the faithful one, the Holy One of Israel, who has chosen you. Verse 8, thus saith the Lord Yahweh, in an acceptable time have I heard thee, and in a day of salvation have I helped thee. And I will preserve thee and give thee for a covenant of the people to establish the earth, to cause to inherit the desolate heritages. Right. So now this first part here, right, in an acceptable time have I heard thee, meaning at a certain point in time, though it sounds like it's past tense, it's really future tense from when it's being prophesied of by Isaiah. But in an acceptable time, meaning at the appropriate time the Lord has deemed, he would hear Israel, right, respond and help us, right? And in a day of salvation have I helped thee, meaning when the time that the Lord has set is right, he is going to send that salvation. He is going to now open or give access to the way of salvation, which would be likened unto the Lord helping us. Because for a good period of time, our people were in a state of being lost. That's why you hear so much, especially when Yahushua came on the scene, of Israel being lost sheep. But at that point, we no longer started to be lost because the shepherd came and found us and started to gather us. And that shepherd came because the Lord heard us. And that was the time of him hearing us. And that was the time of him now giving us a way and opening up that path so we can now get salvation. Okay, so now for this, a quick precept is 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 2. And I'm actually going to go back to chapter 5 just to get a bit more context. So the Apostle Paul mentions here, right, in verse 20, now then we are ambassadors of Hamashiach, as though God did beseech you by us, right? So the Lord used us to call you. We pray you in Yahushua's stead that ye be reconciled to God, right? So to turn back and be joined back to the Lord in the stead of Yahushua, right? Yahushua is not here, so we're like ambassadors. We're doing that job in his stead to bring you back to the Father. For he hath made, right, and we read that in Isaiah as well, right, to bring Jacob back to the Lord. For he hath made him to be sin for us who knew no sin, that we might be made the righteousness of God in him. And you see, this is why it all starts and ends with Yahushua. So now leading into verse 6, we then, as workers together with him, with who? With Yahushua, beseech you also that ye receive not the grace of God in vain. So don't take this thing for granted. For he saith, and now Paul is quoting Isaiah 49, right? For he saith, I have heard thee in a time accepted, and in the day of salvation have I secured thee, which is to help thee, right? Behold, now is the accepted time. Behold, now is the day of salvation. Because, and the Apostle Paul said that because it was at that time that the Lord began to send the help. And who was the help? Yahushai. Okay, so that was that started the accepted time and the day of salvation. Here, salvation is not in the sense of the day you actually get delivered, right? But the day of salvation is the Apostle Paul saying is now, because Yahushai was on the scene, and so the doors to salvation were then opened because he came on the scene, he died, and this is the reason why the Apostle John wept when he saw that nobody could loose the seals of the book. But when he realized that Yahushua was able to do it, that weeping was over, because now the doors of salvation were opened. And they've been opened up until now, but they're going to get closed pretty soon. Okay, they're going to get closed pretty soon, and then the ultimate judgment is going to commence. Okay, so going back to Isaiah 49:8, and I will preserve thee and give thee for a covenant of the people. See, so who ultimately was given for a covenant of the people? Well, let's go back to Isaiah 42:6. I have called thee in righteousness, and will hold thine hand, and will keep thee, and will give thee for a covenant of the people, for a light of the Gentiles. Right? And there's many precepts in the New Testament, especially even in the writings of Paul, that go into how Yahushua was set up. Right? He said his blood was shed for the New Testament. Right? It was through Yahushua that his blood, that second covenant was established. Okay, which we're going to enter into, or we're entering into, you could say, but we'll see the full effect of that, soon when the Lord returns. Right? But he was given as that covenant of the people, so we could be reconciled back to the Father, as it says, to establish the earth, to cause to inherit the desolate heritages, because through Yahushua and through that covenant, we could then find our way back to the Father, be redeemed, be reconciled, and ultimately be glorified and receive that heritage that we had lost. The Lord said that to Jeremiah, right? Thou even thyself shalt discontinue from thine heritage. So let's go real quick to the book of Isaiah 51:3. For the Lord Yahweh shall comfort Zion. He will comfort all her waste places. He will make her wilderness like Eden, and her desert like the garden of the Lord. Joy and gladness shall be found therein, thanksgiving and the voice of melody. Right? Because when you go into heritage, right, it goes into like, your customs, your traditions, your ways that are attributed to you, but also your land. And these things will be given back to Israel by them returning to the Lord and being delivered. Verse 9, that thou mayest say to the prisoners, go forth, to them that are in darkness, shew yourselves, right? Or in other words, come to the light. And I think, let me see. I wonder if that was also mentioned in here in Isaiah 42. But in any case, who are the prisoners, or how are they prisoners? Right? By ultimately, first and foremost, in the spirit, being imprisoned in the mind. Okay, so how would they come to the light, come forth out of the darkness, and go forth? By the truth. Right? So by the truth being taught through the spirit of Yahushua, by his prophets, those that are prisoners. Let's go real quick to 2 Corinthians. Is it 10? Yeah, 10:4. For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds. See, so what are those strongholds? Those strongholds are those prisons that have been put upon our people, right? And to basically ensnare or enslave their minds, to keep them in this way of this destructive mindset, rather than for them to be set free to turn back to the Lord. And that's why the scriptures tell you that the truth is gonna make you free. Casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalteth itself against the knowledge of God, and bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of who? Yahushua. Okay, so going back to Isaiah 49, that thou mayest say to the prisoners, go forth, right? So be made free. And how does that happen? By way of receiving this truth, it being taught onto you through the spirit of Yahushua, it being taught onto you would set you free. To them that are in darkness, right? In living in a lifestyle of wickedness, not knowing the right path to go down, because that's what darkness is likened onto, being in a confused state. Shew yourselves, or come into the light. They shall feed in the ways, and their pastures shall be in all high places, right? Which is a poetic sense. But how are we feeding? Okay, or how what is our pasture likened onto this word? And we're eating it with our mind. Verse 10, they shall not hunger nor thirst, neither shall the heat nor sun smite them. For he that hath mercy on them shall lead them. See? So because of the Lord having mercy on us, this hunger and this thirsting, which is like a wanting, is going to be satisfied. And as it says, for he shall lead them, even by the springs of water shall he guide them. And a spring of water is reliable because, unlike rain, which starts and stops, if you dig and you hit you hit jackpot, so to speak, and you have a water spring up, you're going to get that constant surety, because that's where they build wells around it. And so what do the springs of waters represent? This knowledge. And it is through those waters that the Lord is leading us and guiding us, that we no longer thirst, okay, as it says, or are smitten by the sun. Verse 11, and I will make all my mountains a way, and my highways shall be exalted. In other words, the Lord is going to make a path for us. NLT, it says, I will make my mountains into level paths for them. The highways shall be raised above the valleys. So it's like just clearing out any obstacles to make a clear path. And this path is not a literal road that you're going to walk on, but it's symbolic. Okay, the path is symbolic as an entrance or a way to salvation. Behold, these shall come from far, which these are referring to Israelites that are scattered. And lo, these from the north and from the west, and these from the land of Sinim, which when you look in the definition of that, it's basically like a foreign or a far region. It doesn't give the exact actual location of it. But the point that's being made here in verse 12 is there will be a gathering, okay, of the Israelites that are scattered. Sing, O heavens, and be joyful, O earth, and break forth into singing, O mountains. Why? For the Lord Yahweh hath comforted his people, and will have mercy upon his afflicted. So why should the heavens and the earth and the mountains rejoice? Because by the Lord comforting his people and having mercy on them, he will establish them again. And under their rulership, the earth would become a paradise again. Verse 14, promise to Zion. But Zion said, the Lord Yahweh hath forsaken me, and my Lord hath forgotten me. Similar to Malachi, right? So with all these good things that the Lord has spoken and prophesied concerning Israel, they're still of the mindset that, oh, well, if God really cared about us, why are we in this condition? Or why are we living like this? The Lord is not real. He doesn't care about us. But really, you brought this upon yourselves. And it's interesting that they would say that. Meanwhile, the path of salvation the Lord has extended to them is right in front of them. It's like you in deep waters and somebody's on a boat and they throw a life raft to you and you're saying, oh, you don't care about me. You don't want to save my life. You just want me to drown because you haven't jumped in the water. Meanwhile, the life raft is the boat, the whatever is right there next to you. And you just got to grab onto it. Verse 15, can a woman forget her sucking child, that she should not have compassion on the son of her womb? Let's lock it. Just give me 1 second. So as it says here, can a woman forget her sucking child, that she should not have compassion on the son of her womb? Yea, they may forget, yet will I not forget thee. So the Lord is saying here, which is almost like a rhetorical question, right? Like, can a mother forget her own, sucking child? the child that she nursed and gave breast to and took care of and lifted up? No, right? The answer is no. You can't, unless she had like a amnesia or something like that, or an accident or something. As it says that she should not have compassion on the son of her womb. It's almost like going against nature, right? By design, mothers are going to be that way. But the Lord is saying here, even something as unlikely as this, right? Even something as unlikely as this to happen, the Lord, as he says, even if this did happen, even as unlikely as it is, even if it did happen, I wouldn't forget you. Okay? Yea, they may forget, which is little to, a very slim chance that that would happen. But even if that was the case, I would never forget you. Meaning my love for you, my remembrance for you is stronger than that of a mother's bond to her children. Behold, I have graven thee upon the palms of my hand. Thy walls are continually before me. Right? And looking at this in the NLT, sometimes I like to switch to the NLT because the wording makes it easier to understand. As it says, see, I have written your name in the palms of my hands. Always in my mind is a picture of Jerusalem's walls. Here, as it says, well, in NLT it says in ruins, but in the KJV it doesn't. So it's good at certain parts, but you also have to be mindful, right, at other parts. But here the Lord is saying in the same thought as in the 15th verse, I will never forget you, right? And it's not literal. The Lord doesn't have a literal engraving of the name Israel in his palms, but it's kind of like people get tattoos today, and say they get a tattoo of like their loved one or their grandma or something like that. They'll never forget that. They do that so they'll never forget that person. Like it's always there. Every time they look at their arm or look at where the tattoo is, they always remember this person or that love or whatever they have for this person. So it's kind of like along those lines here. Thy walls are continually before me, meaning like your dwelling is constantly in the mind of the Lord. So he's constantly watching and thinking about Israel. Thy children shall make haste, thy destroyers, and they that made thee waste shall go forth of thee. So that thy children shall make haste in the sense that your children would, or your descendants, let me actually just pull it up here. Soon your descendants will come back, and all who are trying to destroy you will go away. Right? In the NIV, your children hasten back, and those who laid you waste depart from you. Now, something I also want to mention here is it's partially understandable, right? Speaking as a man, that Israel didn't at the time, right, with the state of mind they were in, they didn't fully understand these things, because this makes sense to us because we have the full picture. But imagine being at a time prior to even going into the Babylonian captivity. The walls are built. The temple is there. Okay. Life has been continuing on. Yeah, the northern kingdom has been taken into captivity, but you were delivered from the Assyrians when they came, the southern kingdom that is that I'm referring to here. So Isaiah is speaking here almost in the sense of you're being delivered from some destroyed state. Your people have been scattered, your children or your descendants spread abroad, but the Lord is going to bring them back to you, right? He's going to fix all the waste places. He's going to bring the help. He's going to bring the Redeemer. He's going to gather you back out of the darkness. But you're here like, but I'm not in ruins. My kids are still here. The nation, at least the southern kingdom is still here, so a part of this wouldn't fully click until us having witnessed all the things that we have gone through. Now we can see, this makes sense why the Lord said that. This is why we needed a light. This is why we were referred to as Gentiles. This is even before we became in that state of mind. This is why Isaiah was saying the things he was saying, because the Lord was showing him things that are to come, some further than others. But this is also an example to prove the faithfulness of the word of the Lord. And like we read in the previous chapter, the Lord said, look, I'm showing you these things long before they happen, at a point where it doesn't even make sense, so that when it does come to pass, you can remember it and you can acknowledge that, yes, this is the faithfulness of the Lord. What's another example? Another example is in this time, right? Back in the days when the apostles were prophesying of all the things you're starting to see now, at a time when the nations that would be involved in doing these things weren't even remotely looking like they would be doing it, people were like, what are you talking about? How is that going to happen? But now, as different events transpire, you can see, oh, now I see what they were referring to. When they mentioned these camps, when they mentioned the martial law, they mentioned the troops, they mentioned all these things, the World War III. Now I see it. Yeah, because now the things that have led up to it are happening. So back in Isaiah chapter 49, verse 17, as we read, thy children will make haste to return, and thy destroyers, right, our oppressors, which goes into these nations, these heathens, which made us waste. They abased us, right? They mistreated us. They shall, as it says, shall go forth of thee, in other wording, meaning they're no longer going to have that power over us. Verse 18, lift up thine eyes round about, and behold, all these gather themselves together and come to thee. As I live, saith the Lord Yahweh, thou shalt surely clothe thee. So all these, remember, in verse, where was it? Right, verse 12, the Lord is mentioning that the gathering of the Israelites, right, starting with the elect from the various lands in which they've been scattered. Okay, so these are the these that are where is it at? Coming onto thee. Okay, coming back to Zion, coming back to Jerusalem. As I live, saith the Lord, thou shalt surely clothe thee with them all. And this is, once again, metaphorical talk, likening the returning, okay, of these Israelites back to Zion, to and like Zion receiving them, to like putting on, a diadem or jewelry or ornaments. Because the Lord also likened us unto a beautiful diadem and different ornaments. Right. So as it says here, thou shalt surely clothe thee with them all, as with an ornament. That right there. Right. What's the term? Simile. There's a definition they used to teach us, right? Which was, let me see. Simile, comparing two things. There you go. This is like the grade school definition of a simile, right? It says here, a simile is a figure of speech that compares two different things, highlighting a shared characteristic by using the words like or as. Okay. So for example, she was as quiet as a mouse. She's not a natural mouse, but she's quiet. Mice are quiet. So she was as quiet as a mouse. It's comparing those two things with the shared characteristic using the word like or as. So, and Isaiah does that a lot, right? Sometimes it's metaphorical. Sometimes it's using a simile. Sometimes it's just flat out symbolic. But here's an example, right? Thou shalt surely clothe thee with them all, as with an ornament. So like how you would deck yourself with an ornament is how you're going to clothe them. But in this case, you're not actually wearing Israelites, right? But it's just an example to drive home the point. And bind them on thee as a bride doeth. Okay, then when you bind something on you, you basically like, you attach, right? You put it upon you, right? Just like a bride who gets ready, puts those ornaments and the things she got to put on. Verse 19, for thy waste and desolate places and the land of thy destruction shall now even be too narrow by reason of the inhabitants. So what the Lord is saying here is the places which are your habitation and your dwelling places, which became desolate, right? Remember, even in Ezekiel 38, it also refers to Israel as a land that is brought back from the sword, right? When you look at our history, there have been many points where it's been broken down, it's been destroyed, it's been made desolate, X, Y, and Z. But here, the Lord is really referring to, like Isaiah mentions in more chapters that come later, how we're going to be fruitful, we're going to multiply, we're going to become so much that now there's going to be a complaining of there not being enough space for us. Okay, as it says, one shall become a nation and so on. So that's why it says, for thy waste and desolate places and the land of thy destruction, which obviously is going to be rebuilt, shall even now be too narrow by reason of the inhabitants. So because of all the people, it's now going to become too small. And they that swallow thee up shall be far away. So you're gonna be delivered. You're gonna be in a position of being fruitful, to where your enemies are gonna be far, far away from you, and you're gonna grow in abundance to where your land is not even gonna be enough to hold you. Verse 20, the children which thou shalt have, after thou hast lost the other, shall say in thine ears, right? So similar to what happened with Job, right? He had children, he lost them, but then by remaining faithful to the Lord, he got them again. So here, the children that you're going to have after thou has lost the other, right? So after the times of us here having Israelites being, destroyed and yada yada, after that time, when we're in peace again and we start to populate and grow, as it says in verse 20, the children which thou shalt have after thou hast lost the other shall say again in thine ears, the place is too strait for me. Give place to me that I may dwell. Now, the point of this is not to put emphasis that the land is small or we're going to be squeezed one on top of another, but it's rather to emphasize the fruitfulness, okay, that we're going to be in, so much so that it's going to really require us to expand past the land that we've been given, which is the whole emphasis that's being put on here by this example of, like, your descendants are going to be complaining that there's not enough space. But that's why we have all these planets out here. And we know the Lord is about space. He's about abundance. Right? The scriptures even tell you, woe unto those that join house to house. So looking at this, in the NLT, it says, the generations born in exile will return and say, we need more room. It is crowded in here. Actually, I think the NIV makes more sense. The children born during your bereavement will yet say in your hearing, this place is too small for us. Give us more space to live in. Right? So as I mentioned here, in essence, we're going to grow to the point where we're going to need more space. And there's a precept for this. Let's see if I can find it. I think it also might be in Isaiah, but it mentions about the borders not being able to contain Israel. Let's see. Let me see if I can find it real quick. If not, then we'll just keep on going. Border. And let's look down to the book of Isaiah. Yeah, just bear with me while I look for this. Did I miss this? Let's see, borders. Oh, maybe it wasn't in Isaiah. Let me see if I can find it. Let's see. Bible verse about borders of Israel not being big enough to contain them. They're quoting Isaiah 49. That's not the one. I feel like I've seen this somewhere, but I just can't remember exactly where it is. So that's all right. If I find it, maybe if the Spirit is on me, I'll post it in the comment section. But anyway, let's carry on. Verse 21, then shalt thou say in thine heart, who hath begotten me these? Who hath begotten me these? Seeing I have lost my children, and am desolate, a captive, and removing to and fro. And who hath brought these up? Behold, I was left alone. These, where had they been? Obviously, this is not literal, but the feeling that's being described here is going from a state of scarcity, of a state of constantly having the children here are like, if the mother is likened unto Israel, the children are the actual people, the tribes, right? So having constantly being destroyed, destructured, killing one another, being subject unto these heathens, right? And not actually having a lifestyle to be able to be fruitful and multiply, and being so used to that, and now looking around and seeing this abundance, okay, of Israelites everywhere, having been delivered, we're like just, flourishing and thriving. It's like the feeling is almost going to be like, yo, where did all these people come from? Since when, where there's so many of us, right? Or just all around like that. So this is the NLT. It says, then you will think to yourself, who has given me all these descendants? For most of my children were killed, and the rest were carried away into exile. I was left here all alone. Where did all these people come from? Who bore these children? Who raised them for me? See, so it's that's why it says, thou shalt say in thine heart, right? You're gonna see this glory. You're gonna see this the fruitfulness and the expansion of Israel in safety and peace and prosperity, and it's gonna feel almost like, damn, where did everybody come from? Verse 22, thus saith the Lord God, behold, I will lift up mine hand to the Gentiles, and set up my standard to the people, and they shall bring thy sons in their arms, and thy daughters shall be carried upon their shoulders, right? And there are other precepts that cross-reference this, but basically there's gonna come a point in time where the Lord, first, obviously, now you have the gathering of the elect that are scattered in the various nations, but they're being gathered by this word. But there's gonna come a point in time where you're gonna have the heathen nations actually bringing Israelites that are in their lands back to us, right? Back to Israel, back to back to Jerusalem. And I think there might be one Isaiah 63 or Isaiah 60, one of those chapters there. There's many chapters that go in here, but where are we at? Yeah, this is one, Isaiah 60:4. Lift up thine eyes round about and see, all they gather themselves together, they come to thee. Thy sons shall come from far, and thy daughters shall be nursed at thy side. Yeah, and then so Isaiah 60 goes into this as well, but we'll cover that when we get there. Verse 23, and kings shall be thy nursing fathers, and queens thy nursing mothers. So if you get the picture so far, the Lord here is describing the latter end of Israel, right? Having been restored, repopulated, revived, and delivered. This is the condition of the state we're going to be in. Our enemies are going to be far away. We're going to actually be able to enjoy our children. Our nation is going to grow, and the heathens are going to be subject onto us, right? They're going to serve us. So those that were in positions of kings and rulers are going to be reduced to our servants, okay? Male servants, female servants, attending to our every need, our beckon, our calls. And kings shall be thy nursing fathers, and their queens thy nursing mothers. Right. So once again, like Whatever it is that we need done, they're going to do it because they're going to be our servants. They just like we were theirs. They shall bow down to thee with their face toward the earth and lick up the dust of thy feet, which is to say they're going to bow down very low to show subservience and reverence to us, right? So in the ancient world, when you bow down all the way down with your head to the ground, it was likened onto your mouth being pressed to the ground before the feet of the one that was in front of you to show that respect. And thou shalt know that I am the Lord Yahweh, for they shall not be ashamed that wait for me. Yeah, because by waiting upon the Lord, he's going to deliver us. Okay, and he's going to glorify and beautify us. So that's going to start with the elect. And why are they not going to be ashamed? Because the Lord is going to do everything he promised them to do. Verse 24, shall the prey be taken from the mighty, or the lawful captive delivered? And this is similar to what we read up above about can a mother forget her child that she, nursed? So here it's saying, prey that's been taken by a mighty person, it's rhetorical, right? Like can prey be taken away from a mighty person that is like secured it, or a captive who was captured by, say some like strong person be just let go? Chances are not. Okay. Let's look this up here. NIV says, can plunder be taken from warriors, or captives be rescued from the fierce? But thus saith the Lord Yahweh. So here it sounds impossible, right? This isn't something that you go around happening. It's almost the equivalent of saying like, can you put your hand in fire and not get burned? But it's being mentioned here to make a point, to say that something that's considered, can't be done, the Lord is going to do for the sake of delivering Israel, right? But thus saith the Lord, even the captives of the mighty shall be taken away, and the prey of the terrible shall be delivered. Why? For I will contend with him that contendeth with thee, and I will save thy children, right? So we are the captives of the mighty because they're mighty because we're powerless against them, being the nations, primarily starting with Esau. And we're likened also onto the prey of the terrible, but we're going to be delivered because the Lord is going to fight for us against those that fight against us, and he's going to deliver us. Verse 26, and I will feed them that oppress thee with their own flesh, and they shall be drunken with their own blood. So what the Lord is, as it says here, as with sweet wine, what the Lord is saying here is he's pretty much going to bring them down, right? Have them destroy themselves. That's what it's likened onto, because nations themselves don't have flesh, right? But it's likened onto them basically destroying one another as the way that the Lord is going to bring them down, okay, to deliver us. And really, when you look at it, right, the ultimate destruction that's going to happen via World War III, yeah, the angels are going to be here with the Yahweh Shai, and they're going to be destroying this place as well. But majority of it is also going to be done by these people fighting against each other. And all flesh shall know that I, the Lord Yahweh, Bahasham Yahweh Shai, am thy Savior and thy Redeemer, the mighty one of Jacob. See, so when all is said and done, and the Lord makes his appearance and delivers Israel, it's going to be broadcasted and known all throughout, just like it was amongst the nations when he delivered us from ancient Egypt, that the Lord is the Savior of and Redeemer of Israel. And that brings us to the end of the book of Isaiah, the 49th chapter. Lord willing, this was edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham Yahweh Shai, Bahasham Recha Kodesh. And until next time, Shalom.